So, hi everybody. I'm Karen Johnson. Welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here today to listen to my interview with Peter Bonaker. Peter Bonaker has been a wonderful teacher and mentor and friend through my journey in shamanism, and I know many of you know him too and are familiar with his work with the Four Winds. And now I want to introduce you to his book. Peter's written a book called, let's see, Sacred Shield, Shamanic Protection for the World Today. I love that. That's a lot of powerful words all put together that you chose there.
Yes.
And so, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you have quite the background, an interesting background in education and construction and shamanism, and share a little about where you came from and how you got to this point.
Oh boy, that's a big starting point.
It is.
I first taught when I was 13 years old. I was a Boy Scout and I was a swimmer. Had already gotten to the point of being able, to certify as a lifeguard. And I remember teaching other Boy Scouts when I was that age, and that just only went on from there for me. And always, I would guess my best description would be I've always been happiest when I've been teaching. And um, so
And that's so
that's
clear
kind
you
of
enjoy it, and
that's the bottom line. And so it's a whole career really in that theme of being a teacher, hiring teachers, managing teachers, developing, mentoring, long history in special education, um, bringing young professionals into the business, psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, teachers of every make and description. Eventually ended up as a school principal,
oh,
elementary principal in a very high need district, one of the first full inclusion schools in the country.
mm,
And then that had its own course, that had some twists and turns that were rather intense. Uh, One leading to being sort of like, don't let the door hit you as you're leaving. Um, and all parts of a long journey, then ending up at the university, teaching postgraduate for about 10 years. That's where I truly learned to be a teacher, and
mm,
kind of the requirement to be completely unbiased when you're teaching in a private university.
mm.
You have the full range of philosophical orientations, I guess is
Yeah,
how
and
I would
social and
put that.
cultural and all those things. Yeah.
Yes, and then kind of along the way, diversifying, I was at a place where I had to rely on my innate skill. And so that was where this building contractor piece, I'm literally a Finnish carpenter, skilled at that level. So I had to come to that and rely with that. And kind of simultaneous at that time, I was, as an adjunct professor, I started as a handyman. Oh my goodness.
Mm.
That's how baseline it was. Became a licensed contractor. And then simultaneously also stepped into the shamanic training. And so kind of all those were going along hand in hand. And then I think stepping into the teaching of um, shamans, developing shamans, I had the gift of having a broad knowledge of the shamanic traditions, and probably my suspicion is strongly that I've probably did this work in other lifetimes. Uh, and then I had the knowledge of the learning, of teaching, of, and so those two combined really allowed um, the, the, what I've always thought of as teaching at the highest level, where you're really working with the evolution of the soul, and which is how I would categorize the shamanic work, is that we're in the mythic level, we're in the soul's journey. That's where we're really working. So that's kind of a very short version of a very
Yeah,
long
version.
story. And
So you kind of started working at that soul level early on when you were 16 and had your near-death experience, right? I mean, I think this is you coming naturally, this circling around.
Absolutely. It was, a real struggle. It was in 1965. And at that time, those who are a little bit older in your audience might remember One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It
Mhm.
was Jack Nicholson, Crazy Man, and really the modus operandi was shock treatment. That was the status of psychological intervention. And so when that happened to me, there was no hand, there was no guidance, there was no one saying, here, come with me, follow me. And
Yeah.
so my struggle was long and hard.
Huh.
uh, I went through massive amounts of depression. I probably, for the next, you know, large number of years, probably I was involved in every form of psychological treatment.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and never getting healed, getting on to the next step, but never really healing until I went into the shamanic work, which then allowed access to the much deeper healing to take place. And I was ready. It wasn't until literally till I was 40 years after that accident, almost to the day, it all came right up in my face and said, now deal with it.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. And then I think so hence the book is so important because people don't have to flounder around and wonder what they have. Now they have your book, it's a kind of a handbook for this kind of a dark entity which you call Mordrigal.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's something that if people don't know the name of, they maybe have experienced, they're familiar with how it feels, their darkness in their life, and maybe an inability to kind of shake it loose. I mean, I think many people have had that experience where they know something is just not right, but don't know how quite to, what it is, how to deal with it, and how to release it. And so that I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today and about the journey to self love, which is such a big journey.
Such a big journey.
Such a big journey.
More important than ever today.
Yeah. Because I think you touch on it a little bit in your foreword, talking a little bit about COVID and the isolation of COVID that can exacerbate things for some people when we're not connected up with others.
If I were to try to describe in one word what the devastation is that happens, it would be isolation. That
Mhm.
when we, close ourselves off to the world, to our friends, our family, our close ourselves off to ourselves, most
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
um, that's where the devastation rests, and causes many, many levels of kind of, if you think of it as going sliding in a downward direction, isolation really pushes that, exacerbates it. And whatever condition you're in, if you're one of the things I see repeatedly, one of the first flags that comes up for me when someone contacts me is they're not sleeping.
Mm,
And when you're not sleeping, that absolutely exacerbates every aspect of anything that you're struggling with,
yeah.
because that exhaustion kicks in. And
Yes. Oh,
then the interference in dream time, the languaging that starts happening in the head and in the brain, all of that, really opens up when people aren't able to get rest.
yeah.
And then everything starts closing in. And that's probably the most difficult aspect, I think, of this, and most telling aspect when people are
Yeah.
suffering.
And I think in our culture too, even saying self-love makes people feel a little icky, like somehow that's selfish. Like maybe that we're talking about narcissists, that are all about themselves. I don't think in our culture so many things we don't deal well with, but self-love, right? It's like how what is that? How do I get there? And isn't it am I being selfish and I don't want to become a narcissist and I think we've had so much shame, blame, and guilt that tossed our way about being too much for yourself and not thinking about other people and not blah blah blah. That it's confusing. The self love piece can be very confusing for people.
I think it has, another way to phrase it would be self-nourishment.
Yeah,
Okay, nourishing your heart, nourishing who you are, and that it's okay to do that. It's actually more than okay. It's enormously important
yeah,
to be gentle, be kind to yourself. And I often find myself saying that to clients: is be kind to yourself. Don't let up. Don't be quite so hard
yeah,
here. And um, I think when people are able to nourish themselves and care for themselves, they're this energetic form, this aspect of what we're talking about in when the darkness grabs a hold, it has much less of a hold. Has much less of an ability to grab on. If you go out and walk, if you find yourself in total isolation and you go out and you say hello to somebody you walk by, or you go into the store and you say how are you, to the clerk that's going to check you out, those are all steps that, and sometimes are so basic, but almost trivial to bring up. But I have had clients where I've said, walk outside your house, say hello to someone.
yeah,
That much isolation. And if you find yourself in that situation, oh my goodness,
yeah.
um it's dire. That's a dire situation.
Dire, yes. And some people really get in, and the darker you sit and the more you're in, the more worse it becomes. And it's interesting. I love this quote that you have in the beginning by the chief. Let me see. I can't remember his name, but
Chief Dan, I
Chief
think.
Dan. Chief Dan
Yeah,
talks about self love is so important, and when we don't have self love, we begin to devour our own personality.
precisely.
Oh, I read that and I thought, oh, that's it. That's what
Yeah,
happens. We begin to devour our own personality, our connections, our happiness, our joy, our gratitude, our, love of whatever we love, reading, walking, hiking. We begin to devour it when we don't have self-love. We can't find it.
exactly.
Yeah.
That was the opening. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that. Thank you for sharing that. That's so important, because that's kind of the essence.
It's
That's the
so
essence of
yeah.
the whole story,
And that's
really.
what I love about that. One of the thing I really love about the book is it's not a hopeless book. It's a hopeful book.
Mm,
It's not like, okay, you're just this is it and it's dark and it's terrible. Yes, it's a dark energy, but there's ways of dealing with it. And you have that in one chapter, so many chapters, but you talk a little bit about the song of the soul. And I'd
Yes.
love to have you talk a little bit about the song of the soul. I thought that was so illuminating.
Well, I was trying to, in writing the book, I found myself, one of the most important things as a writer or an author is who's your audience? Who
Mm,
are you writing to? And for me, I landed with a dual audience. Okay. One, because I've been in the field and been a teacher and have had the opportunity, the grand opportunity of working with many, many, many people in their journey to becoming practitioners
yeah,
ultimately.
including me.
And to and at the same time wanting to reach an audience that isn't in that realm, okay, not that aren't practitioners. So it was two sides to it. So the song of the soul became a metaphor to try and embrace a broader, softer way of understanding that we have a gentleness within us. We come in with a hum. We come in with a tone in our lives, and it's a song. It's not necessarily a song with words, but it's a rhythm. It's a hum, and that when we lose that, then we begin fracturing away from ourself.
Mm,
And so the song of the soul is really a metaphor to talk about that soul's journey, and in the shamanic world it's called the luminous energy field.
mhm.
um, we have other terms for it. There's a bubble around us that we all have. It's an energetic field that we walk in. The song of the soul is a way of trying to represent that in a very gentle sort of way, and to describe that when a dark force comes in, it's hijacking that, it's sealing that off, that song, and you can't hear it. It didn't go away, you just can't hear it.
I love that.
It's,
Mm,
and so, and as that began to evolve as a concept in the writing, um the um the idea of depression. Depression is losing that tone, losing sight, losing your hearing of the song of your soul, knowing, so importantly, that the song never goes away. No one can take that song away. It's not going anywhere. It's that it's been interrupted, it's been hijacked, it's been interfered with, and you can get that song back.
yes, I love that. I love that. And sometimes people, one of the things we talk about is hiring somebody experienced with dealing with this particular entity and energy to help you take it off, a shamanic person, someone to help you. But a lot of times people just want to know, what can I do today? So I love that. Go outside. Today you can go outside. Today you can, you don't have to wait for an appointment. You don't have to wait to find somebody. Today I can do this. Today I can take this step. And so that's the hopeful piece that I love about this.
I think I had two major commitments in writing this book, and one was to bring the idea of hope, that there is hope, and don't lose sight of the hope
Yeah.
that surrounds you every minute of every day.
Mm,
There's hope. And the other side, the other piece that emerged as being very important to me was a cautionary tale. This is a time to know, as you step into the energetic world, if sometimes I often hear it as like a kundalini awakening.
mm.
I'm not sure what that is exactly. However, however, all the energies out there in the world are not kind. They're not, there are energies waiting to usurp, your good energy, and if you allow it. And my sense has been that much of the writing in the energetic field has sidestepped that piece. That, I had one of the more intense clients I had along the way came to me, very, very well educated, very high on the intellectual scale. She said, "I'm so tired of hearing about butterflies and rainbows, and build an altar and everything will be okay." That wasn't working.
No,
And and that was after she had encountered, you know, maybe at least five shamanic efforts, different practitioners. And the one thing that, once there was some clearing of the energy, the dark energy, even though it came back rapidly, she was able to say to me, "I feel substantiated hope."
yes,
Substantiated hope. Like,
yeah,
really, there is hope. I can get past this. There is a means out. And she was a client who described, when she was first attacked, her heart being almost exploding in her chest, and then describing her being as being in a treasure chest, locked up with chains wrapped around it, thrown to the bottom of the sea.
oh,
That was her metaphor
oh, so
for
powerful.
where she had been. And that, in the removal via the protocol that, I've had the good fortune to learn and to teach to
Yeah,
and to write to, um, was the beginning of finding her way to realizing there is a self still. There is that, she's still there. And that the attack was very palpable, very measurable. And, so, and all of that is, to the song of the soul. The
to the
song of the soul is there.
and then, some people really can feel that and have an idea when something happened, but sometimes this entity will sneak in when someone's a child and doesn't really understand what's going on, especially children that have suffered sexual and physical abuse and trauma of different kinds. So, those children are so used to living with that entity that they don't really know anything different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, working with that and finding that and seeing that is important too, because children can't always express what happened.
Exactly. And they're unaware. I think, maybe, again, why to write a book like this is experiences like I just described. But also, I can tell you, I've been dealing with, I've had to deal with 4-year-olds. I've had a slew of 4-year-olds suffering severely. And that's a very unforgiving energetic form that will, take a child that, as you just described, doesn't have any idea,
Yeah.
and attack them, and try to seize their soul. It's
And and feed off them forever, in a way. It's that
absolutely.
feeding on that, taking that energy down their natural song of the soul and hiding it and having hijacked it so they can feed on these kind of lower emotions, the fear, the trauma, the pain, all that sort of thing. And I thought, wow, how can that be? Why would an entity want to, even to the point of whispering suicide in the person's ear, suicide ideations? But then when you think of cancer, cancer will also kill its host.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's like that. It's something that will actually kill its host. And I don't know if you want to talk to at all. I was reading another book, Watiko, Finding Watiko, and I think maybe Watiko is another name for this.
Very much so. And I talk about that with Tico and dispelling Watiko, and
Dispelling Watiko.
Jack Forbes, who wrote about this. And actually, just for a brief moment, I mentioned three major authors in the book that have addressed this subject, and one of them goes back 100 years. And
Yeah.
when I read her work from the 1920s and 30s, I mean, it was jaw-dropping to me that she was describing exactly what I'm describing. So this form, this energetic form, has been around a very long time.
Yeah.
And um,
Walking the earth and feeding on earthlings. I mean, I don't know if it's alien or if it's native to this Earth, planet Earth. I don't know, but I know it's a force. I've seen this force. I've worked with it, and so
yeah,
those of us who know really know. And the good part, like I like to say, is it's treatable. You know,
it is.
it's
That's the
treatable.
important piece.
And you actually have a protocol. So you actually have a protocol, a way of dealing with steps to take in an energetic way by a shamanic practitioner to help get rid of this. And you share
Yes.
that in the book too.
That's very much in the book. That's
Yeah.
in the conclusion. It's the next to last chapter. The last chapter is ideally about hope and about what you can do. But the protocol emerged over many years. When I look back at my records, my files, um, I could see where I had noted the irregularity of what we had been trained to look for as far back as 2008.
Mm.
And I didn't know what I was seeing. And then the same pattern began presenting itself. And it was kind of like a long evolution of where the pattern was present. It seemed very uncreative. It was, always the same, and yet it would come back. It was clever in many ways. It expressed itself in many ways, and so I began thinking, oh my gosh, there has to be some kind of a control center, or I called it a sending unit, or a receiving unit. It was like a beacon going out saying, come in here, come in here, come in here.
Mm.
And uh, I will forever remember with the deepest gratitude, really. I was working with a hospice physician who was suffering with this, and he was having what he described as his Kundalini awakening. He was becoming enlightened, and really the world of energetics was opening up to him. And I was searching somewhere in the torso because I would see things that looked like implants to me, and I would remove one and go on to the next one. And by the time I got to the next one, it had already returned. So there was such an aggressiveness with this. And I would spend entire healing sessions just working to remove the energy, never getting to the healing.
Yeah.
And he looked up at me and said, my spirit guides want me to tell you, keep doing what you're doing, but you're looking in the wrong place.
Oh.
And he led me right. And I said, well, of course, tell me where should I be looking?
Please do tell me.
Yeah, please, please. And he led me right to the back of the base of the neck. And so he turned over. I went to work on the base of the neck, pulling out the energy that was there. And lo and behold, every other aspect, every place where I could feel energy disappeared.
Yeah.
It just disappeared. So it was like that became the control center. And that was the pivotal turning point of developing the protocol. Because then, as I was able to start to teach to it, um, then other students were seeing more. And then we could see it pretty, present at the first chakra. And then, of course, oh, duh, if it's back here, well, of course, it's housed in the throat chakra. And so that became the protocol. And that became to where I could actualize that in, let's say, 10 minutes
Hmm.
process. And then the rest of the time could go into the healing
Yeah.
that needed to happen to begin finding the source of where the energy was entering at. So that's kind of the history of the protocol. um, I owe a great debt to those people from 2008 to it was actually 2013, where it was emerging. It wasn't all the time I would see it, but it was enough that it was a pattern, and all that energy went into, and enormous amounts of resources from me and from the clients went into just trying to get this energy off of them, and not getting the healing done. So it was a lot of frustration, a lot of energy went into it. But then once that protocol began to emerge in a palpable way, then the healing could start taking place, and then slowly progress started to be made with the
Yeah.
with the most severe kinds of situations.
Mhm.
So I would say from 2015 to now, enormous amount of work has happened. I'm hopeful that in the teaching there's probably a base of about 130 people that I've had the opportunity to teach the protocol to, are in whatever their practice is, their mode, their interpretation, that it's being utilized, and
Oh,
it's
yeah, absolutely.
it's working. and
Absolutely.
and so that's a gift that
It's a big gift
uh,
to all of us, and, we're all so grateful for you for exploring this and finding it and helping us so that we can help our clients and, find a way out from underneath this because it's a very heavy burden. It feels like something's just standing on your neck, like you're just, unable to do anything, to move, get forward, whatever. So, and so, the people say, well, if I'm a practitioner and I know this method, what do I need the book for? Well, I can tell you what I use the book for. I like to refer all my clients that have this to your book so that they can get this wonderful perspective of hope, and that they can understand what's going on a little better than I can explain. I mean, you explain, it's a whole book, more than I can explain in a session. And I think it's really helpful for people to be able to wrap their head around that there is something. It can be a dark energy and it can be gotten rid of. And here's the ways, here's things you can do. And it's a real good guide to practitioners too. Sometimes we forget things, homework type steps that we can assign to our clients to help them, go out in nature, take a walk, gratitude practice, things that people can hands-on do after the session, so it doesn't come back.
Karen, that's all just music to my ear. The song of my soul is singing right now. It's like, oh, how sweet to hear that. I
Yeah.
That's such nice feedback. Thank you so much. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, thank you too. And thanks for writing the book. And gosh, anything else that you feel that the listeners ought to know? Anything that I missed or anything you want to share?
Well, I go into soul fractures, and that originally appeared in the writing process as family fractures. And then eventually I was able to, broaden it to understand it as soul fractures. So um, a moment for that is maybe worth some energy
Absolutely.
with that. And what's happening with that is, um I know the subtitle that I put on the chapter on soul fractures is that shame is the
Absolutely.
bottom line to suicide, and it's the piece that we don't like to talk about in our culture, in and probably in the world culture. We don't really, it's very hard. It's a hard subject to deal with. But it's shame is extremely fundamentally, it's the lowest vibration in the emotional, in the scale of emotional ratings. Okay, it's down there where it's really tearing you down. And I think if any message that I would like to really see resonate in the long term is to begin more open dialogue around shame and carrying shame, and that's not useful. It's not a benefit on any level whatsoever. And and if you're in your audience today, um, someone can identify feelings of shame. That's a starting place. That's a starting place to go to work and to begin caring for themselves in a whole different way.
Mm.
And and I know there's been some fabulous work done around shame, but still and yet, it's a piece that we as a culture don't want to deal with. We want to throw the person out. Okay, if there's a perpetrator on some level, we'll get rid of them. We don't want to look at them anymore, and we have plenty of examples of that.
Yeah.
And we may have more than ever right now, for the current circumstance of 2021 that we're in right now.
Yeah.
But um, if we can open our hearts to deal with that concept and really be able to open our dialogue around it. And it's a tough one. It's really tough
Yes.
because in my experience, the not so it's tied into post traumatic stress syndrome, okay, PTSD, which is very real and very, very intense when people are suffering from it.
Yeah.
And if we hold that as being relatively present in our world today, in our world culture
Yeah.
today, um, we need to open up our eyes, our hearts, and really start dealing with that. That would be my real
Yeah.
quest here, is to um, come to greater opening, understanding, and taking the stigma away from, there's been so much
Yeah.
sexually oriented violation in the world culture. Okay, and this isn't just a US or Europe or this.
No,
I
no.
mean, this is every culture. And until we can open our eyes to that and allow it to come into the dialogue, and uh, then we can really start to heal.
Yeah.
And um, so
I
that
think there's such an element of hiding. Sometimes I tell my client, they're like, well, I don't know what I feel shameful about. What were you told to hide from everybody? Or were you told that was you don't we don't reveal this about our family? That's a family secret. This is something we don't tell others. That's
yeah,
the good beginning.
the family secret.
The family secrets.
And that's a soul fracture. And that soul fracture, until it's healed, that's where this energy comes in.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure about that. I'm
And sometimes just beginning to tell somebody, anybody, that secret can be horrifying. I know from my own thing, I've really felt like, oh, God's going to strike me dead because I was told never to talk about blah, blah, blah. And so even as an adult, there's a lot of, I don't, I've taken that hide it secret so seriously for so long that letting it out is really hard. So, yeah, what is that thing you were told not to ever tell, not to ever confide, to hide?
right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Mm.
And then I one more aspect to that is, the perpetrator's wounded too.
Yes.
I mean the victim of the perpetrator, it's profound, and there's helplessness there. But on some level, the perpetrator also is a very wounded soul.
Yeah.
And
Victims
why
of
would they
victims
do
of
that?
victims, what does it say, 7 generations back? I mean, we carry a lot of uh, victimhood and ancestral ways of coping and dealing and things that have come down that when we can begin to release those tanglements, those tangled threads, we can truly heal.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's the heart. That's the heart of it, I think.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate you talking with me and my listeners so that everybody can have a little insight into this big thing, and Mordrigal or what Tico, whatever you want to call it, this dark energy and how it can be shifted and lifted, and that there is hope.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the opportunity. I'm deeply grateful and honored to have this moment with you.
All right, talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank